In this lesson, I'm going to show you some alternatives so that you can have a web server in your computer and you can therefore run games built with Phaser locally. If you just double click on a Phaser game or try to open it with a web browser, you'll see that nothing shows, and if you open the console, you'll see a series of XML HTTP request errors. The reason being, your web browser doesn't allow access to local files for obvious reasons. If you could access local files, the web would be a very dangerous place. So you need a web server so that you can access the files under that web server. What exactly is a web server? In very simple terms, it's a program that you connect to using your web browser. Every time you go to a URL like zenva.com, you're connecting to a web server that's on the other end, and the web server will send you files. So for security reasons, when you go to a certain domain, you can only access files from that domain after the page has been loaded. So let's now look into some alternatives. The easiest one, the most basic one, would be to install a code editor called Brackets. You need to go to brackets.io if you want to use this alternative, and then you can download Brackets without Extract. I'm not sure what Extract is. It's another product. You can just download Brackets. How does Bracket work? Let me show you. You will open a folder. So you'll do File, Open Folder, and you open, say, a Phaser game, and then you have an icon here so that you can live preview this game. And this is being loaded actually using a web server. So you can see that there's a certain a certain IP address and a certain port, that this is the location of the web server. And you're loading the game like so, and therefore you can open it. So that's one alternative. Another alternative is a product called the Intel XDK. The Intel XDK is a complete solution for HTML5 cross-platform development, which includes the Brackets editor in one tab, and then includes other tools too for emulation and for building in the cloud. Later in this course, we will use the Intel XDK to build the app for native platforms like Android. So you can see that this has the brackets built into it. So this is the same Brackets editor I just showed you, but it also has an emulator. So that you can see what the game would look like on different phones, and it has other options too. So this is a way for you to run the Phaser examples. You can just run them here. If you can run my app or run an emulator or live layout editing, you can just open it in a Chrome or Firefox. So that's another option. If you are familiar with the command line, okay, let me say that the two alternatives that I just showed work in all operating systems, in Windows, in Mac, and on Linux. If you're a command line person, if you know command line, another way to quickly run a web server is to go to the location of your web server where you want your web server to load. So in this case, I'm gonna go all the way to where I keep this farming animal. Again, this is only if you're familiar with command line. You're perfectly fine with the other two alternatives. You can run a Python web server if you have Python installed. This works in all operating systems as well. So all you type is Python m simple HTTP server and then a port number, and that will create a web server on the certain port. So now if I open a web browser and if I type in localhost and the port, I should be loading this as well. So in this case, I'm loading it with Python. Another way to have a local web server installed is really an overkill for this case. I do not recommend it. The only reason why I have it is because I also used it in some other projects, but it would be to install Apache, a web server that you can use locally. It's very much used for PHP development. I still maintain a bunch of PHP projects, so that's why I have it set up. And the only reason why I'm showing you this is because you might get a glimpse of this every now and again, at least over the first module. So I want you to know what it is that I'm doing. But in your case, I would really recommend to stick with one of the other options, or maybe find some other one as well, unless you're also doing some other stuff. In this case, I have Apache with different virtual hosts, and one of them gives me access to all of my projects, so I can go to one file or to one folder or the other. It's actually pretty comfortable for what I needed. But if you're not familiar with command line or much configuration of these sort of things, I don't want you to to spend too much time. Just use one of the simpler alternatives, either brackets, either the Intel XDK, which we will use later in the course, or find some other ones like the Python one, and there are some other ones as well. Maybe some of the students will share some options in the commenting area. So just keep it simple. Make sure you're able to run a Phaser game, and once you can open and run a Phaser game, one of the examples from Phaser or the downloadable source code files from the course, once you can get that up and running, move on to the next lecture, and we're going to start actually coding in Phaser. Cool. See you then.